So all of us in the gaming world, and of course Nintendo fans, know how difficult yesterday was with all of this Nintendo news about Zelda, the NX, and E3, which was the big one for me. But in doing that, I realized that I wanted to try to make one more video, sort of talking about some of the more positive things going on. Everyone with yesterday's news was kind of on all sides of the fence. Some people were more negative than others. Some people were more positive than others. I tried to err more on the positive side, but still be kind of realistic about the unfortunate crappiness about a lot of what happened yesterday. It really was a mixed bag, and it was hard to see the positives, but I do think that the positives were there. But in thinking about what happened yesterday and kind of realizing after talking and doing the podcast with Terminator Juice and Mr. T and making my own video and seeing some of the interviews and information that came out of Nintendo after the initial news, we start to realize that, wow, 2016 is done for Nintendo. They really seem to have nothing else going, barring a few surprises at E3, which I do still think may happen, some very, very small surprises. Barring a few surprises from that show, there's nothing else with Zelda having moved. It kind of makes you realize that, not only is the Wii U going away in 2016 is done, but I feel like StarFox Zero might end up being the last really big Wii U game. So with StarFox Zero being just over a week old, brand spanking new game, first time this series and character has come back in his own game in 11 years, it's pretty crazy to think that StarFox Zero might be the last really big Wii U release. And I know that the Tokyo Mirage Fire Emblem Sessions game is coming out sometime fairly soon, and I am excited for that to come out and fill that void for fans of that series and that genre. I'm not really interested in it anymore. Like when I first had heard about it and we knew about this Shin Megami Tensei Fire Emblem crossover for years, I was like, dude, that is going to be badass. I was picturing like a more Shin Megami Tensei kind of like darker spin with really awesome complex gameplay and strategy elements like Fire Emblem and a deep darker story. I was picturing a pretty badass game, and it's totally different. It's a very light and fluffy, colorful J-pop kind of weird game that I think is more on the Persona side than it is on the Fire Emblem side, and that is completely fine, but it does change my interest in the game, so I'm only really going to play it if it just is getting amazing reviews, and there's a couple of people I know who are still pretty interested in it, and if they're raving about it and saying that it's good for people who aren't really fans of that genre, I will check it out and probably pick it up, but as of right now, I have no plans to do so. And I also, as I've said this a couple of times too, I don't think that game is going to make a big splash here in North America. I don't think it's going to make a big splash anywhere outside of Japan. It's just such a Japanese-centric, focused kind of experience and game that I think it's only going to appeal specifically to fans of that genre and people who like that stuff. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but because of that, I think that it isn't going to qualify as a very huge release, and StarFox Zero is going to be the last one with a huge marketing push from Nintendo, using characters in a brand that people know and recognize and love, and that was just a very high-profile release. So StarFox Zero, the last game until whatever happens with the NX in March, and I kind of wanted to just celebrate the game a little bit because I've now completed it. I made my video when I was a couple of hours and a few missions in discussing it and, talking about some of the negatives, the difficulty in learning the control scheme, the fact that it's maybe a little too similar to Star Fox 64, some of that stuff, the fact that it isn't as fast-paced, crazy, frantic, next-gen sort of dogfighting that I wanted. But at the same time, it's an awesome game. It's a Star Fox game. Despite acknowledging those few issues, honestly, I love the game, and I've now completed it. And I wasn't sure if I loved it more or the same. And now that I've gone back to a couple of missions and I'm getting so crazy good at this control scheme, I really love this game. So I think that we should celebrate the fact that this is the last big Wii U game, and that the last big Wii U game was the return of Star Fox. And yes, again, I'll admit that it maybe isn't the exact return of Star Fox we could have or should have had. I think that there's future potential for this game to be a little bit more modernized without compromising what makes Star Fox Star Fox. Some of the bros that I do the podcast with felt like if we do too much to change Star Fox, that it's not going to feel like actual Star Fox and be a good game, like if we make it too long or remove some of the crazy controls. And I get it. I even agree with that to a degree. But I just feel like there are a couple of things that we can do to Star Fox to still make it a little bit more modern and a little bit better. And I think that if Nintendo continues with Star Fox, which I'm pretty sure they will, I don't think this game is going to be the massive blowout success like a Mario Kart or a Smash Brothers that we all would have liked and that Nintendo would have liked. but I do think it's going to do well enough for them to warrant continuing the series in the future, probably, I mean, not probably, definitely on the NX. I will wrap up this quick video about StarFox, the last Wii U game, by saying one thing, and I've talked about this before, and I'm going to echo it again now that I've played the game even more. Anyone who has this game and is maybe struggling to enjoy it or struggling to be good at the controls, or anyone who's a little bit worried about playing it, maybe otherwise would be interested but is worried because of the controls and some of the negative feedback. Granted, there's a lot of positive feedback too, so hopefully you guys are finding that when it comes to Star Fox Zero. But anyone who's thinking about it or struggling with it, I can't tell you the difference it makes when you go back and play a couple of missions that you've already played. I would even recommend doing it the way I did it, and go back and play the first 2 or 3 missions again, even if you're halfway through the game, your first run through the missions, your full campaign. Go back and play some missions, and once you've started to sink in with these controls, it's like worlds apart from when you first start. When you first start, you are, just like Ms. T said, you're fighting against the controls. Your brain is thinking a different way, which it should be because that's what we're used to. But if you stop fighting against the controls, which is easier to do if you go back and play a mission you've already played, and you start to just kind of work with it and let your brain accept what you're doing, holy cow, it becomes a whole different experience, and you just zone out, and you become you become one with these controls. And it's really cool, and you can see what Miyamoto and Nintendo were thinking when they created this. And I'm willing to bet that if this game had even more time to be developed, it would probably be an even more fine-tuned system. It very much is reminiscent of Splatoon, so anyone who likes Splatoon needs to kind of keep that in mind. It's not the exact same. There's enough differences and fast-paced action going on, but it has the feel and the overall kind of structure and concept of Splatoon. And you can tell that if Nintendo had more time, they probably could have fine-tuned it, made it a little bit better. They probably could have even make it look a little bit better, even though I do think the graphics are fine. I'm sure that there's a couple of things they could have done to improve it. So, like I was just saying, I think that we'll get Star Fox in the future. I don't think that this was a one-and-done thing. No matter how it's received, I think that Nintendo can hopefully just understand that, hey, this was a game that we tried some kooky things, and the reasons people didn't like it isn't because they don't like Star Fox or we made a bad game, quote unquote, but because they did some kooky things. They made it too similar to an old game. They had tried a really crazy control scheme that turned a lot of people off. And if they can acknowledge that they don't have to do those things every single time and maybe kind of make just a more focused game next time, I think that they'll be willing to try Star Fox again. But we haven't seen the sales numbers yet. I do think in Japan the first week or something wasn't really all that great, but we haven't seen the North American sales numbers yet. So let's wait and see. Hopefully it can do 500,000 to maybe even 1 million. You know, that would be fantastic. Nintendo's games do that. Nintendo has great marketing. They make games sell when they really, really want them to, and they have been really pushing Star Fox Zero. So I'm hoping that it hits that 1 million mark and that we can count on Nintendo making Star Fox games in the future. But, you know, in wrapping up, like I said, Star Fox Zero, probably the last big Wii U game, you know. I talked about if at E3 we get some surprises, and I brought this up on a podcast too. I feel like we may see something where they reveal smaller games, and I made a comparison to like Captain Toad or Kirby and the Rainbow Curse. Those smaller budget title games that are typical Nintendo quality and creativity, but they were just $40, very small, short kind of campaigns and experiences, nothing too crazy, not really AAA, so to speak. And I think that even though they're only going to have Zelda playable, they may still show some other things. They may have trailers and say, hey, here's 2 other games that will be on the Wii U this year. We should see some 3DS stuff, of course. There's a lot to do with the 3DS. But I think that they may still show us a couple of things. And if they do, that's great. Hey, that fills out 2016 and the rest of the time until the NX and Zelda comes out early next year. It sucks to have to be waiting 11 months for this, but you know what? Nintendo, they're the king of secrets and surprises, and I think that they're being true when they say that Zelda's the only playable game they're going to have, but I think it is entirely possible that they still surprise us with some information or some trailers or some kind of surprise at E3 about something. It's obviously not going to be the NX, and it's not going to be any more playable games. They've said they're not going to be anything playable. They said they're not showing the NX at E3. Those things I'm sure are true, but could they show us a couple of other things and some neat surprises? Yeah. In fact, I would even bet on it. So let's just wait and see what happens there. Let's celebrate the fact that Star Fox was the returning character for this year after 11 years, and it happens to be what seems to be, I should say, the swan song for the Wii U. What a crazy 4 years of games it's been for the Wii U. It's not the greatest system in the world. It had its fair share of problems. It didn't have third parties, but it's got a great first-party lineup and a great exclusive lineup, and I love that Star Fox was this last game. And we'll see if we get a couple other surprises at E3, but I don't really know what's going to happen there. Star Fox is probably it. I love the game. Hopefully hopefully you're loving the game, or at least give it a shot and have a chance to see what this game is really all about. But that's it for this quick kind of random video, just kind of trying to be a little bit positive about Nintendo since there's all this bad news we got yesterday. And that's it. So thanks for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule 2 Review, and I'll catch you guys next time on another video.